As we get closer and closer to the 2024 NFL season, rookies from all around the league are trying to make roster spots and are trying to solidify roles on their respective teams. Still though, it is not too early to project next year's rookies. By next year, I mean 2025. In today's video, we're going to go through a 2025 NFL mock draft, go through each player, why they're so hyped up, and what my thoughts on each and every pick are. Ultimately, I'm using a mock draft from Pro Football Network as we're going to go through each and every pick that they currently have. This is a pre-2024 college football season edition, but before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about a way too early 2025 NFL mock draft. Okay, so how we're going to do it is we're going to go through all 32 picks, but probably the first 16 picks, I'm going to go through it much quicker, and then the last 16, we're going to go a little bit more in depth. So according to this mock draft, the guy they have going at number 32 overall is Walter Nolen. You're probably more than familiar with Nolen, as he was the #1 recruit in the country at one point. He was part of Texas A&M's crazy 2022 class, and as a true freshman, he had 29 tackles. This past year, he upped that number to 37, and he also had 4 sacks. While Nolen is getting a little bit better, he still has been pretty underwhelming. He decided to transfer to Ole Miss, and if he has a huge 2024 season, he could play his way even higher, but for now, he's going in the first round purely based on potential and practically his build, as he is 6'3" and over 300 pounds. At number 31, we have JT Tuimoloau. He's one of the more interesting players in this draft class, as honestly, I think he needs to be much higher than this. He at one point was also the #1 recruit in the country, but he decided to reclassify and eventually signed with Ohio State. He's shown plenty of flash over the years with Ohio State so far, as a true freshman he had 17 tackles and 2.5 sacks, and then he upped that to 28 and 3.5 in 2022, and got even better in 2023 with 38 and 5. JT Tuimoloau can pretty much do everything, as he's a heavy-handed pass rusher, has good awareness, and has great vision. The one thing that he lacks a little bit is production and some bend, but other than that, he's a pretty good player. At number 30, we have Josh Conerly Jr., as he's an offensive tackle from Oregon. Conerly comes out of Rainier Beach High School in Seattle, and he was the number 8 player in the class of 2022. So far, Conerly has been pretty great, as he has great natural movement and has been a sturdy anchor for the Oregon Ducks over the last 2 years. He is slightly undersized at 6'4", but he pretty much has everything else, and if he has one more good season, he'll definitely be a first-round offensive lineman. Up next, at number 29, we have Ashton Gillotte. He's a guy that I honestly did not know much about, but he has honestly been blowing up over the last few months and had a really good season. Coming out of Boca Raton High School in Florida, Gillotte was just a 3-star recruit in the class of 2021. He eventually arrived at Louisville and has been pretty good. He's 6'3" and 270 pounds and has a very explosive first step and plays with immense power and strength. Last year with Louisville's breakout, Gillotte ended up having 11 sacks, and he could show that he was both a pass rusher and a run stopper. Gillotte is one of those interesting names for the 2025 draft class, and someone I'm excited to watch next year. At number 28, we have Jonah Savaiinaea. He's an offensive tackle for Arizona, and if he goes in the first round, he'll be the second straight year that the Wildcats have put a guy into the first round after they had Jordan Morgan. He ended up coming out of St. Louis School in Honolulu, Hawaii, and was a 3-star recruit and the number 3 player in the state. He arrived at Arizona in 2022 and has already shown that he can be an NFL-ready right tackle, as he's 6'5" and 330 pounds. He needs a little bit of refinement to his hands, but he could eventually evolve into one of the top linemen in this class and be a first-round pick. At number 27, we have a guy named Princely Umanmielen. I hope I said his name correctly, and he's actually the 3rd straight dude on the list I've had to look up how to say their name, but he's been a really good pass rusher in the SEC over the last few years. Going back in time, he was a big deal, as coming out of Manor High School in Texas, he was actually a 4-star recruit and the number 11 strong side defensive end in his class. At 6'5" and 250 pounds, Princely was going to be a guy who could develop into a superstar. After not doing much as a freshman and sophomore, he would burst onto the scene in 2022 with the Gators, finishing with 39 tackles and 4.5 sacks. Princely had his best season yet last year, as he had 39 tackles once again and upped it to 7 sacks. He became a 4-star recruit in the transfer portal and decided to transfer to Ole Miss, where he'll be paired alongside another guy on the list we've already talked about, Walter Nolen. This is going to be a pretty forceful defensive line, and Ole Miss is going to be pretty good this year. Okay, seriously, what is with these ridiculous names? At number 26, we have Ariante Ursi. He's an offensive tackle from Minnesota, and this guy is a name that you definitely need to know about. Apparently, he's already being compared to Lane Johnson from the Philadelphia Eagles, as he has striking athleticism, insane power, and he's 6'6" and 330 pounds. At one point, though, he really was not that big of a deal. He was just a 3-star recruit and the number 77 offensive tackle in the class of 2020 as he came out of Ruskin High School in Kansas City, Missouri. He's ended up starting the last couple of years, and with one more big season with the Golden Gophers, he could play his way into being a first-round pick and a potential franchise offensive lineman on Sundays. At number 25, we have our first wide receiver prospect to talk about, and that is Emeka Egbuka. Coming out of Washington, Emeka Egbuka was the number 1 wide receiver in his class and the number 9 overall player. He was completely dominant in high school and decided to sign with Ohio State. Egbuka has been a pretty good player over the last couple years for the Buckeyes, as during his freshman year he got 9 passes and then had a career season in 2022 with 74 catches for 1,151 yards and 10 scores, alongside Marvin Harrison Jr. This past year he was dealing with injuries, but still managed to catch 41 passes for 515 yards and 4 touchdowns, with Harrison gone off to the NFL and should have an 1,000-yard, 15-plus touchdown season and be a first-round pick and the next great Ohio State receiver in the NFL. At number 24, we have Denzel Burke, a corner from Ohio State. Burke was a big deal coming out of Saguaro High School in Arizona, as he was the number 10 athlete and a 4-star player in the class of 2021. Burke has slowly played more and more over the years for the Buckeyes, as he put up big numbers as a freshman with 37 tackles and 12 pass deflections, and then had 34 tackles and 5 pass deflections in 2022, and then this past year had 24 tackles and 8 pass deflections. While his numbers have kind of gone down over the last few seasons, Denzel Burke is seen as a guy who could play well at the NFL. He has the mental and physical traits that NFL teams fall in love with, as he's an above-average athlete, has excellent ball skills, and has great intelligence and anticipation. While he may be a little bit undersized and his stats may be lacking, with a big 2024 season, Burke could play his way and stay in the first round. At number 23, we have one of the most polarizing names in the 2025 NFL draft class, Shedeur Sanders. The son of primetime, Shedeur was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school, and after originally committing to Florida Atlantic, he would go to Jackson State, put up big numbers there, and then transfer to Colorado, where this past year he threw for 3,200 yards with 27 touchdowns and 3 picks. Shedeur sort of has everything you're looking for in an NFL quarterback, but will he be able to win a ton of games this year, and will his ego get in the way? That's something that people are wondering about, but for now, Shedeur looks like he should be a first-round quarterback and could go even higher than 23rd with a big 2024 season. At number 22, we have Tyleik Williams, a defensive tackle from Ohio State. He's another one of those Buckeyes defenders that decide to skip the 24 draft and come back, and he's always been a big deal. Coming out of Unity Reed High School in Virginia, Tyleik Williams was a top 150 player in the class of 2021. Williams ended up arriving immediately there, and as a freshman, he ended up having 16 total tackles, and would improve upon those numbers each and every season since then. He had 21 tackles and a sack in 2022, and then this past year had 54 tackles and 3 sacks. Ultimately, the Ohio State defensive line and defense is loaded, but he has all the physical traits to be an NFL interior lineman, and Tyleik Williams is someone I'm really excited to watch. Man, there's a lot of offensive linemen in this class, as at number 21 we have Emory Jones Jr., an offensive tackle from LSU. Emory Jones Jr. has always also been a pretty big name, as he was a top 100 recruit and the number 4 interior offensive lineman in the class of 2022. Jones has been an anchor on that line so far, and at 6'6" and 322 pounds, Emory Jones looks like a force who will block in the league for quite a long time. At number 20, we have our second Arizona guy, and that is corner Tacario Davis. Coming out of Millikan High School in Long Beach, California, Tacario was a 3-star recruit and the number 104th overall corner in his recruiting class. So far, he's played 2 seasons, as he had 7 total tackles in 2022, and then blew up into a monster in 2023. Alongside the rise of Arizona football, Tacario had 25 tackles and 15 pass deflections. The guy was a human highlight reel at the corner position, made big plays, and also has ideal length and athleticism to make it at the NFL. He's one of my favorite prospects in the 2025 draft class, and Tacario Davis should be a household name by the end of the season. Michigan has done a great job at sending people off to the NFL, and Kenneth Grant is the next one up. He is an absurd athlete, as while he was coming out of Merrillville High School in Indiana, he was a 4-star recruit and a top 300 player in the class of 2022. So far, Kenneth Grant has had a pretty productive career, but he's really known for his athleticism. This past season, he had 29 total tackles, 4 pass deflections, and 3.5 sacks. Apparently, Bruce Feldman from The Athletic says that he's one of the craziest players on his freaks list, as he ran a sub 5-second 40-yard dash time, has a 29-inch vertical leap, and was clocked at 19 miles per hour. if Grant has a huge season, he could find himself in the first round and be one of those athletic freak defensive linemen that always goes near the top. Up next, at number 18, we have another lineman, and that is Deone Walker. He's on the defensive side of the ball, and coming out of Cass Tech in Detroit, he was a 4-star recruit and a top 300 player in the class of 2022. Deone Walker obviously arrived at Kentucky with a lot of hype because of his recruiting pedigree, and this past season he would emerge. He had 28 total tackles and 7.5 sacks. Kentucky's been producing some big-time linemen over the last few years, and maybe he'll follow in the footsteps of Josh Allen and play his way into the top 10. Before we get to the first half of the video, be sure to leave a like and let me know your favorite draft prospect for 2025 down below. At number 16, we have Evan Stewart, a wide receiver from Oregon. He's the second receiver to talk about, and after he was the number 1 wideout in the class of 2022, Stewart got off to a decent start at Texas A&M, but was kind of slowed down. As a true freshman, he caught 53 passes for 649 yards and 2 touchdowns, and then this past year he caught 38 passes for 514 yards and 4 scores. Very underwhelming numbers, to be honest. But he decided to transfer to Oregon this past offseason, where he will play with Dillon Gabriel and will be lined up with Tez Johnson. Stewart is known for pretty much having every tool in the toolbox, but will he actually put it all together and have decent production? I mean, the guy has 6 touchdowns in 2 years, and that's just not going to cut it as a first-round pick. We'll have to wait and see, though. At number 15, we have one of the best offensive linemen we've seen in years, and that is Will Campbell. He's one of those guys that has been hyped up for a long time, as coming out of Monroe, Louisiana, Will Campbell was a top 100 player and a 4-star recruit in the class of 2022. He's arrived at LSU and has started on the offensive line for the last couple of years, and he's 6'6" and 320 pounds. He pretty much has all the size and physical traits that an NFL team is looking for, and he looks like a franchise offensive tackle in the making. At number 14, we have Benjamin Morrison, a cornerback for the University of Notre Dame. Coming out of Brophy College Prep in Phoenix, Arizona, Benjamin Morrison was the number 37 corner in the class of 2022 and a 4-star recruit. So far, Morrison has been really solid for the Fighting Irish, as in 2022 he finished with 33 tackles and 5 pass deflections, and then this past year he broke out with 31 and 10 pass deflections. He also has 9 interceptions in his 2 years, and if Morrison has one more big season, he could definitely be one of the top corner prospects in this year's draft. He's an electric mover, has great technique, and is super physical at the catch point. Scouts are really high on him, and I'm excited to see what he's going to do this year. At number 13, we have Travis Hunter, who is the do-it-all wide receiver and defensive back for Colorado. After being the number 1 recruit in high school, he decided to flip from Florida State and follow Coach Prime over to Jackson State, and I guess so far it has worked out for him. He was really solid with Jackson State, but last year he broke out. He had 57 catches for 721 yards and 5 touchdowns, and then while he was on defense, he had 31 tackles and 5 pass deflections and 3 picks. He also suffered that scary injury against Colorado State, but he bounced back. Okay, to be honest, I don't think he's the number 1 wide receiver in college football like NCAA 25 says, but he's still a freakish athlete who when he gets to the NFL is probably going to dominate. Travis Hunter is a superstar in the makings, but he still needs to bump up his production. At number 12, we have Mykel Williams, an edge rusher from Georgia. Coming out of high school, he was a big deal, as he was a top 10 recruit and the number 7 player in the class of 2022. He completely dominated at Hardaway High School. Williams had 28 tackles and 4.5 sacks as a freshman, and then this past year he had 16 tackles, 2 pass deflections, 4.5 sacks, and a forced fumble. He has typical NFL size for an NFL lineman, and Mykel Williams is looking at having a big 2024 season in which he could end up playing his way into the top 10 if things go his way. Up next, we have Tetairoa McMillan. Coming out of Servite High School in Anaheim, California, Tetairoa McMillan has been seen as a game changer for a couple years now. What's funny is actually his high school quarterback was Noah Fafita, who is actually his quarterback at Arizona right now, but going back in time, he was actually originally committed to Oregon before he would flip to Arizona and go to Coach Fish. He was the number 37 player in the country and the number 4 wideout in the class of 2022, and McMillan stepped up and was a star right away. He had 39 catches for 700 yards and 8 touchdowns as a freshman. Then this past year in 2023, he upped it to 90 catches for 1,400 yards and 10 scores while he was playing alongside Jacob Cowing. McMillan is an insane athlete who has great production, and it looks like he has the physical skills at 6'5" to make a huge impact in the NFL. This is Arizona's 3rd guy projected to go in the first round, and what a year for them so far. At number 10, we have Malachi Starks, a safety from Georgia. Coming out of Jefferson High School in Jefferson, Georgia, Malachi Starks was the number 1 athlete in the class of 2022 and the 4th best player. He He's been seen as a future NFL guy for quite some time, and as a true freshman, Starks ended up having 69 tackles and 7 pass deflections with 2 interceptions. In 2023, he got even better, finishing with 52 tackles, 7 pass deflections, and 3 interceptions. Starks is a super athlete and is a guy who commands the secondary, and NFL teams cannot wait to get their hands on him. He's super explosive and can pretty much do everything and plays for a great Georgia defense. At number 9, we have one of the most freakish athletes in the country, and that is Abdul Carter, an edge rusher for Penn State. He's always been a big deal, as coming out of LaSalle College in Pennsylvania, Abdul Carter was seen as a 4-star recruit and the number 33 linebacker in the class of 2022. Carter arrived at Penn State with a lot of hype, and as a true freshman finished with 56 tackles, 4 pass deflections, 6.5 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles. He was all over the field, and in 2023, he was also doing the same thing. He had 49 tackles, 5 pass deflections, 4.5 sacks, a forced fumble, and an interception. Abdul Carter, as I said, is seen as a freakish athlete, and with one more good year in Happy College, Abdul should be a top 10 pick and a ferocious edge rusher for years to come on Sundays. At number 8, we have Luther Burden III. As a Mizzou fan myself, Luther Burden is the best wide receiver to come through Mizzou since Jeremy Maclin, and he's done a great job. Originally coming out of East St. Louis High School, Luther Burden was committed to Oklahoma, but would end up flipping and staying close to home. I know it's technically across the river, but many considered him to be an in-state get. He was a 5-star recruit and the number 2 wideout in the class of 2022, and ended up getting off to a decent start as a freshman. He caught 45 passes for 375 yards and 6 touchdowns, and then this past year he became one of the best receivers in college football and helped Mizzou football resurge, finishing with 86 catches for 1,200 yards and 9 scores, while sometimes being double covered. Luther Burden is seen as a receiver who can pretty much do just about everything, as he can stretch the field, has really great hands, elite athleticism, insane change of direction, and can kind of be plugged in any sort of offensive system. Luther is a guy that people were super pumped to watch and could be the first wide receiver taken in the 2025 NFL Draft. Up next, we have to talk about Will Johnson. Some people think he is the best player in college football, and in my opinion, he's the most underrated. Coming out of Grosse Pointe South High School in Michigan, Will Johnson was a top 40 player and the number 4 corner in the class of 2022. Will Johnson has been tremendous so far, as during his true freshman season, he finished with 27 tackles, 3 pass deflections, and 3 picks. And then this past year, he also had 27 tackles, 4 pass deflections, and 4 interceptions. That also included a pick 6, and Will Johnson is seen as a guy who has perfect measurables for a corner and is a true lockdown dude, has great movement, is super quick, and is set to have a star career in the NFL. Teams are not going to be throwing his way this year, but don't be mistaken, Will Johnson is definitely worthy of a top 10 pick. At number 6, we have Conner Weigman. This is actually a very interesting pick to me, as I'm really high on Weigman, but he really hasn't shown that much yet. Coming out of Bridgeland High School in Texas, Weigman absolutely blew up in the class of 2022 and eventually became a 5-star recruit and the number 3 quarterback in his class. Weigman took over towards the end of the 2022 season, throwing for 896 yards and 8 touchdowns. He started the 2023 campaign with 979 yards and 8 scores, but quickly got injured and would have to sit out the remainder of the 2023 season. Weigman has shown significant flash, as he has great arm strength, incredible vision, and is also super accurate. He's pretty much one of those guys who's a boom or bust type quarterback prospect, and if he can finally put a season together, I think Conner Weigman could be a franchise quarterback. I think going at number 6 is a little bit high for him, as I see him more as a late first round talent, but still, I admire them for going bold a little bit. At number 5, we have another quarterback, and that is Carson Beck. Many believe he will be the first quarterback off the board, and after coming out of Mandarin High School in Jacksonville, Beck was actually originally committed to Alabama before he would flip to Georgia. He was considered the number 5 pro-style quarterback in the class of 2020, and Beck waited his turn for 2 years behind Stetson Bennett. He ended up taking over this past year in 2023, throwing for 3,900 yards with 24 touchdowns and 4 more scores on the ground. He led Georgia to a perfect regular season and got better by the end of the year. Honestly, I like Carson Beck, but I don't know if he's franchise quarterback potential just yet, but honestly, if he puts together another season like he had last year, then Beck will definitely sell me, and I think he's a good quarterback who will have a good NFL career. Okay, so at number 4, we have Mason Graham. Wow, I don't know what was in the water at Servite High School, but Mason Graham, Noah Fafita, and Tetaroa McMillan all came from the same high school. He was considered a 4-star recruit and the number 25 defensive lineman in the class of 2022. Graham obviously went over to Michigan, and this past season, he ended up finishing with 35 tackles, 1 pass deflection, 3 sacks, and 1 forced fumble after he built upon a pretty solid freshman campaign in 2022. Mason Graham is seen as an elite level athlete and is a dominant interior defensive tackle who has great strength, great hands, and great size. I'm not quite sure if he's worthy of a top 5 pick, but for now, he's ranked at number 4. At number 3, we have an offensive tackle that has been talked about for years now. Kelvin Banks Jr. came out of Summer Creek High School in Texas and committed to play for the Longhorns after becoming a 5-star recruit in the class of 2022. This was a huge get for Steve Sarkisian, and he was able to build around Banks. He would start as a true freshman and had one of the best freshman seasons for a lineman in college football history. Banks was just as good last year, and he is seen as a guy who is 100% going to translate to the NFL. He's definitely worthy of a top 5 pick and will anchor an NFL line for probably a decade. That's how good this guy probably is. Okay, so at number 2, we have one of the most ridiculous picks I've ever seen in the mock draft. They have Nick Scorton going number 2 overall. If you haven't heard his name, I don't necessarily blame you. There's also could be a reason for that, as originally coming out of high school, Nick Scorton was actually named Nick Carraway. I'm not quite sure what happened as his name changed or something, but he was a 4-star recruit and decided to sign with Purdue. Scorton ended up having a decent freshman year in which he had 22 tackles and 2 sacks, but this past year he blew up into one of the best defensive linemen in the Big Ten. He finished with 50 total tackles, 3 pass deflections, 10 sacks, and 1 forced fumble. Scorton would decide to enter the 2024 transfer portal and was seen as the number 15 overall player. I guess that somehow translates to him being the number 2 overall prospect. It just doesn't make sense to me, but I guess there is some sort of reason for it. At Texas A&M this year, he'll be seen as one of those guys who has a sky-high ceiling and NFL-ready size, as he's 6'4" and nearly 300 pounds, plus he'll just be 20 years old on draft day. He's also shown to have a great motor, great strength, and insane flexibility. I guess he's seen as one of those prospects that sort of is like a unicorn, and that's why he's ranked number 2. But for now, there's no reason to have Scorton ranked as the number 2 overall prospect. Still though, I'm excited for this guy. Finally, at number 1, we have James Pierce Jr. I don't know what it is. I guess this whole mock draft is just offensive and defensive linemen, as there's just no way that there's going to be 3 straight defensive linemen taken to open the 2025 draft. Coming out of Julius Chambers High School in Charlotte, James Pierce Jr. was a 4-star recruit and the number 173 overall player in the class of 2022. Pierce would arrive and ended up having 5 tackles and 2 sacks in 2022. Then this past season, he finished with 27 total tackles, 9.5 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles to go along with a pick 6. I guess he's seen as the number 1 overall player in the country. I don't know about that. He does have great athleticism, agility, and acceleration. Plus, he has a great profile at 6'5" and 243 pounds, but I don't see a world in which 4 straight linemen go in the top 5. It's just not really feasible to me, but for now, that's what this 2025 NFL mock draft says. What do you guys think? Who is your favorite prospect from the 2025 draft class? Who do you think will play his way into a first-round pick? And who shocked and surprised you from this list? Be sure to let me know down below. Let me know if I should do a part 2 in September. Leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.